How's it going, everybody? Welcome into the Skyline Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Jack Hartman, joined as always by my good friend, my co-host from the West Coast, Nick Normand. Nick, how you doing today, man?
Doing well, doing really well today, Jack. Just coming off of some incredible end of year college football games. Had a really fun New Year's that I got to spend with some friends, with my brother, just like get some time to rest, some time off. But doing pretty darn well, man. Been a very slow week. That nice awkward week between Christmas and New Year's always feels
Right.
off, but not off in a bad way. Just like feels like we're in another dimension, but
Yeah.
it's good. A lot of football, a lot of friends, a lot of family, lots of quality time. So it's good. How are you doing?
Awesome. Yeah, doing well. Still no baby for us yet, though we do have a date scheduled for her to be induced. So just kind of taking everything day by day. It's weird. I didn't think I would be working at all this week because I figured that I would be off with the birth of our daughter, but here I am. So yeah, so it was nice to get through the holidays, without that drastic of a change and be able to enjoy time, especially since we just moved back to be close to family, be able to really enjoy time with family in that way has been really, really good. But yeah, like you said, lots of great football. Um, We've got a jam-packed day today, recording twice, doing NFL right now. We're gonna take a break and then come back on to do a college episode later. But we're starting with the NFL. Had a great last week, week 17. A lot of really, really solid games that were incredibly consequential into what we're sort of seeing the playoff race look like. A lot of really interesting stuff in terms of a loss for the Pittsburgh Steelers to the Cleveland Browns to give what feels like a classic from at least me growing up. It felt like every year that final Sunday night football game was Steelers Ravens to determine the division. So a little nostalgic to get that back this week, as well as we've got a battle in the NFC South that might end up not meaning anything, which we'll get to that later as well. But for starters, looking back to week 17, Nick, what was a team that impressed you this last week?
A team that impressed me has got to be the Falcons. Their win over the Matthew Stafford led Los Angeles Rams was really impressive in primetime Monday Night Football. Bijan Robinson, obviously, incredible game, over 200 yards from him from scrimmage. Unbelievable job running the ball on a volume of carries, 22 carries, 195 yards on the ground, and a touchdown. He's just such a weapon. He's such a great running back. I think he's the best running back in the league right now as far as a running back. Like, he's just so good. With Kirk Cousins playing efficient football from the quarterback position, I know it's meaningless. I know the Falcons are 7-9, and like, why are you winning games now and looking good, Falcons, when like it doesn't mean anything? Like, what are we
Right.
doing? But really impressive game by them. Man, they just did a great job confusing things for Matthew Stafford, getting bunches of picks with 3 interceptions thrown by Stafford in that game. Just a really impressive job, especially considering Kyle Pitts and Drake London, their two main pass catching threats as far as on the outside, combined for 20 yards on 3 catches. And yet they were able to win and really look good doing it, I think. Really impressive game
Mhm.
by the Falcons. And really, even though they don't have a shot at the playoffs, they are playing upset and doing some really important stuff for how the playoff picture shakes out. Because this Rams team is still trying to fight for the division, and now I don't know that they have a shot to win the division now because San Francisco and Seattle are both playing each other, and I believe the winner of that wins the 1 seed. So the Rams are out of that. But by that Rams team losing, that tossed them out of that. And now they're playing for the 5 or the 6 seed. And the difference between the 5 and 6 seeds massive because the 5 seed gets to play the winner of the NFC South, which looks to be the weak link. And the NFC South picture shakes out differently because of what the Falcons are doing if they win this next game against the Saints. And so
Mhm.
the Falcons, although don't seem like they should be an important team, they are weighing in here at the end of this season. Really impressive job by them.
Yeah. The Falcons looked really good, and yeah, like you said, like a meaningless game, but still one that bears weight. These end of season games, winning them is really important just for morale to help. The thing that we don't see in college football that we do see in the NFL, which is cool, is these end of season games still matter to a lot of teams because you're playing for your contract, or you're playing for another team to be willing to give you a contract, or you're playing for those end of season bonuses based on performance, right? Like, oh, you played 90% of the snaps this year, right? It's like, so like all of those things matter. Um, and so and also there's just the pure hatred of teams in your division, right? Like, I think back to 2022 when the Lions beat the Packers on Sunday Night Football the last week of the season. That game meant nothing to the Lions. They had already been eliminated from playoff contention. But what it did mean was they kept the Packers out of the playoffs, and that was motivation enough for them, or even like way back the first time the Bills made the playoffs with Josh Allen, that last week of this season, the Cincinnati Bengals beat Baltimore in Baltimore to send Buffalo to the playoffs. And the only thing that mattered to Cincinnati was like, yeah, we'll win. We'll keep Baltimore from getting in the playoffs. Like that is something that's really, really cool that the NFL has that keeps these games being special near the end for, you know, 85, 90% of the teams. Of course, sort of the stuff that we've seen lately from the Raiders, they're clearly doing what they can to secure that number one overall draft pick. It feels like with shutting down um, Max Crosby and stuff like that, but still, like, for almost everybody else, no, this still matters. And that's really, really neat to see. And then, specifically to talk about the Falcons, like you said, they looked really good. And not only do they look really good, they look like they have legitimate pieces to build around. I feel like the Falcons were in this weird, like, they have pieces that we want to give credence to and we want to say that it's valuable. However, is it right? Like, if it was valuable, then it feels like we would have seen something by now, and we still haven't. But to see a lot of these guys play really well means like, okay, that means that there is some tinkering that the Falcons can do, especially being in the NFC South, that could seriously make them playoff contenders next year. As it is, they're not that far behind. They're gonna end, if they win this week, they're gonna end at 8-9, and the winner of the division is gonna be 9-8. So too little, too late for them. But they'll still be there, right? And so yeah, really, really great look for the Atlanta Falcons this last week. Team that I was really, really impressed by, and I think that this is sort of a toss up for me between two teams. Um, and it's tough because one of them we've talked about a lot already. So I'm going to go with the other one. I was incredibly impressed by the Baltimore Ravens this last week. To go to Lambeau and to beat the Packers, a team that all year it feels like we've been saying, no, this is a Super Bowl team. I don't think we can say that. I don't feel comfortable saying that anymore because they keep having these losses that you're like, wait a minute, come on, right? They've lost their last three games. They're on a three-game losing streak. Like we really need to pump the brakes on the Packers. Um, but I'm not talking about the Packers. I'm talking about the Ravens. The Ravens come in. Tyler Huntley is playing. He has a very efficient 16 for 20 for 107 yards and a touchdown. Finally, the Ravens keep giving the ball to Derrick Henry instead of stopping, and it shows what he can do. 36 carries for 216 yards and four touchdowns is just, it's insane. I mean, you like that's not even vintage Derrick Henry. That like might be Derrick Henry's best game he's had in his NFL career. Like, insane. They did, of course they were not playing against Jordan Love, right? So like we need to take that into account with the Packers offense. But even still, they totally shut down Green Bay's run game, held them to only 79 yards on the ground. Malik Willis actually played really well. I'm going to be really interested to see what happens with him after this year. What team is gonna sign him as a bridge type guy because they're not in a place. They were too competitive to be in the Fernando Mendoza, Dante Moore sweepstakes, but they need a guy. And hey, if it works, it works. Similar to what we saw with Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield, stuff like that we've seen a lot lately. I saw someone post a meme that said like the Malik Willis to the Jets contract is going to hit like crack when it's announced. But anyway, but still, the Ravens played really well. They didn't just keep themselves in the playoff race. I feel like if we just look at what Baltimore did this last week and what Pittsburgh did this last week, it is really hard to go into this coming Sunday night and not feel like Baltimore is the better team right now. Right now, in this moment after this last week. Now, the Steelers had a really great game 2 weeks ago, and then last week had a dud. The Ravens had a really great game, this last week, and didn't win the previous week, right? So it's just a matter of recency. But even still, like if you look at the team stats from this game, um, Baltimore had 30 first downs, 30 first downs against a defense. Like, yes, Jordan Love wasn't playing, so Packers offense, whatever. But this Packers defense has been a defense that we have given a lot of credit to all year long. Talk about the addition of Micah Parsons and how great that is. I mean, Baltimore had 30 first downs. They ran for 307 yards. Like, they just put the belt to butt to this Packers defense. And the thing that's really interesting about it is typically when you see a team that's like that overloaded and running the football, it means that it's a low scoring game because of how much clock is being used. No, they scored 41 points. Like, they were doing it and they're like, we're not going to stop. We're not trying to shorten this game. We're not trying to slow it down. Like, no, we're trying to establish this and we're going to take advantage of it the whole way through. The Ravens just looked really, really good on offense. They won the turnover battle on defense. They held the time of possession in this game is wild. Baltimore's time of possession was 40 minutes and 16 seconds compared to Green Bay's 19 minutes and 44 seconds. Like, that's just insane. So all that to say, props to the Ravens this week. Not only winning to make this Sunday night game mean anything, but also winning in a way that makes it seem like, man, there's really a chance that this could go either way in the AFC North this week.
I agree. It definitely could go either way in the AFC North this week. I think that the final score and time of possession kind of overstates it. Like as you said, Malik Willis had a really good game. I think that's completely underrating it. Like I think Malik Willis was nails. He was great. He had an incredible game. When he got injured, when his shoulder got injured, and it didn't even look like, I don't believe he got hit in the shoulder, that like he just kind of threw out his shoulder, a previous injury on a previous play, like acted up on it or something. But I think that's when it turned late, when it went from a one-score game to a multi-score game when Hall?
Tune.
Clayton Tune,
Clayton
my
Tune.
bad. Not Jaron Hall, Clayton Tune, who also sucks. Both of those dudes suck. Malik Willis is really, really damn good. And when he went out, that game kind of just turned. I would much rather have Malik Willis than I would Tyler Huntley. And I think Tyler Huntley's a really good backup. I think Tyler Huntley is the best backup you could ask for Lamar Jackson at this point in the league. And I think he played a really efficient game. I just think that currently with the injury situation with this Packers team, that it's hard to do much of anything. And they still played a really solid game of football all around for a majority of that game, I think. I think the run defense struggled a lot. That's what happens when your superstar edge rusher and your best defensive tackle are out. And I just think that this Packers team has kind of been running on fumes for the last couple weeks with injuries and big games and big game losses. It's just really been hard, I think. But I do agree that right now I think Baltimore looks like the better team than Pittsburgh, and I think I would favor them. The game being in Pittsburgh, I think, matters a lot, and Pittsburgh's lack of receiving threats with DK Metcalf out with the suspension matters a huge deal to me. But that's just kind of how I feel about Baltimore going into this next game. But Just wanted to leave it there. I do agree with you that Baltimore was impressive. And Derrick
Yeah,
Henry, especially at his old age, I believe he moved up to number 4 on the all-time rushing touchdown list, which is
crazy.
incredible. Like for a back in 2025 to be that high up in this era of throwing the football, it's pretty unbelievable, man.
Yeah, and to still be that successful at his age when we're in the world of, use a sixth round pick to draft a running back, as long as he's able to, not fall over, he'll be successful if you get the right O line around him. And then once his rookie contract is up, throw him to the fire and get a different guy, like to still have the longevity, not just in terms of physically, but also longevity in terms of you're still good enough that teams are willing to pay you. And you command a high dollar, is really really impressive. All right, Nick, tell me about a team that you were depressed by this last week.
It's only natural. My Pittsburgh Steelers, it was a pretty depressing game in a lot of facets. I it it's just really hard to watch an offense that can't move the football. Like it's just really, really frustrating to just watch a team where the running backs are good, the running backs are solid, they're able to run the ball pretty darn well. But when DK Metcalf is out and now Darnell Washington, who's a critical part of this team with his blocking and his ability to break tackles and be a complementary tight end, him being out really hampers this team. Like we were just throwing the ball way too much to Marquez Valdez-Scantling. Pat Freiermuth didn't have a catch, I think, until the fourth quarter, and he should be our top receiving threat with DK Metcalf out, and he just didn't get the ball at all for the better part of the game. That's unbelievable to me. I'm like, this Browns team is not known for having incredible linebackers, and even Schlesinger, their rookie linebacker, who's been really good, has been dealing with injury. And then Pat Freiermuth did a great job on him late in that game, and we didn't throw it to him earlier in the game, which is just ridiculous. That, I think, some malpractice coaching-wise. The Steelers' defense struggled the first drive or two the Browns had. The Browns did have one long play, one long touchdown that was really impactful, I would say, that being the Harold Fannin touchdown catch, which really was more of a classic Shedeur Sanders off of his back foot lobbing up a lollipop, and Harold Fannin being able to have great ball skills and track the ball because he's a really good pass catcher. And the Steelers DB and Asante Samuel Jr. not having ball skills and not being able to track the ball well and not being able to turn his head around. And that really, I think, was what put the Steelers behind the 8 ball, that the Browns got a touchdown and the Steelers could not find a touchdown to save their lives. Even though I do believe that the final play of that game was a play that should have been called PI, the Browns DB did indeed put hands all up on him, did foul him, I think, on that final play. The Steelers didn't play a good game for the whole entire better part of that game. Chris Boswell missed a kick that was really critical in that game that mattered a lot. And I believe that was back-to-back games because he missed a kick late in the Detroit game as well that could have swung the tide if Detroit could have cashed in on that. But Chris Boswell missing 2 kicks late is pretty surprising. But when special teams isn't hitting, when your defense took a little while to settle in, when your offense is that bad, it's really hard. When I'm looking at this Steelers team, I'm like, okay, Freiermuth is reliable, but why is it that he's not showing up? Your running backs have really good hands, but I don't know what receiver outside of what wide receiver on the Steelers team right now can you throw to? The answer is none of them. Adam Thielen, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Roman Wilson, Calvin Austin's been out with injury. It's just a lot of dudes who I don't trust to make a single play, and that's the problem. When you don't have a passing offense, that is a massive problem in the NFL. So the Steelers did make me quite sad this last week. I do think they should have still had a good shot in this game. I think that going for it on 4th down and the 4th down play call when they could have kicked it and got the points there as well was an issue. There were some coaching issues. There were some player issues. I think the narrative, I'm sure you've heard this narrative of the Steelers were trying to focus on Myles Garrett not getting the sack record more than winning. And I think that's very overstated because I think the line between don't let Myles Garrett get a sack and don't let Myles Garrett ruin the game because he's the best defensive player on the planet is a very small line that people are saying it's on the other side of, because it's like, no, we don't want Myles Garrett to sack us for the sack record. And it's like, no, we don't want Myles Garrett to sack us because he can break games wide open, obliterate offensive lines, and completely dominate games. And
Yeah.
so I think for the Steelers coaches to say, we want to stop Myles Garrett, every coach is saying that. Every coach should be saying that. Every coach should be saying, we need to focus on him and not let him ruin this game for us. And so for people to be like, the Steelers coaches didn't want to win the game as much as they just wanted to protect TJ Watt's record. Like, I think that's a pretty cowardly take, to be honest, when like if Aaron Rodgers was just throwing the ball into the dirt more than he was like letting Garrett sack him, it's like, that's a good play by the quarterback to throw the ball away because sacks are negative plays. You don't want to take sacks anyway. So how can you even, unless you got reports directly from Steelers coaches saying we wanted to protect this sack record, which apparently there were, but I don't know that I believe that. Like, I just don't think there's a line that you can have any proof or like be able to really show it was the sack record they were trying to protect and not they were just competent coaches. And the Steelers coaching staff, I believe, is competent. They might not be great, but I think they are at least adequate between their defensive staff and Arthur Smith, who has his critics, but I think is at the very least a solid offensive coordinator.
I think what the Steelers experienced this last week is what like was really like the real, and no pun intended, Achilles heel of Aaron Rodgers in New York, and that is when you get him his guys, he only trusts his guys. So like why do you think he threw to MVS so much? Because he had a good rapport with him in Green Bay. They're two totally different players now. That was years ago. And also like MVS, and it's the same thing that happened with at the Jets with Alan Lazard. Like the reason that he had success with them in Green Bay is because they were on the opposite side of Devontae Adams, right? Like, but when MVS is wide receiver one, he's never been a wide receiver one. Never. Even when he was successful with Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City, he wasn't wide receiver one on those teams, right? So like that the only reason that there was success there was because of you had a monster in Devontae Adams on the other side of the field that teams had to worry about. And so they were willing to let MVS be covered by their second or third best corner and go one on one. Fact is, when you're going one on one against Denzel Ward, who is not the best corner in the NFL, but is certainly a solidified top of the line corner in the NFL, a Pro Bowl corner, like he's not good enough to overcome that. Whether there's a PI or not, he's not good enough to overcome that, right? And so, like, I understand the frustration of like, oh man, there should have been a PI on that last play. But also, you know what? Aaron Rodgers should have seen that Kenny Gainwell was literally wide open across the middle of the field and had a waltz-in touchdown, right? Like, and that's not me saying that the PI doesn't matter, because I think if a foul is a foul, then it should be called. But just that as a way to reiterate the point about like, Aaron, you have to throw to your other dudes, right? Like, yeah, you're right. Pat Fryermuth is the best pass catcher on this team right now with DK Metcalf out. Why aren't you throwing the ball to him? Like Kenny Gainwell is probably the second best pass catcher on this team with DK out. Why aren't you throwing the ball to him more? Why aren't you? He's good enough that he doesn't have to only run running back routes out of the backfield. Go split him outside and have him run real routes. Like, you can do that, but it won't happen. It's MVS, right? It's like, I think Adam Thielen as a wide receiver three is a very capable wide receiver three for the Steelers team, but combined with DK Metcalf being out and having everyone need to step up a little bit, it's like, okay, well, he's not what he was. He can't do what he used to do. Um and so because of that, like, yeah, I think it's just so bizarre to me to think of the Pittsburgh Steelers offense and it not include running the ball down your throat and throwing to the tight end. Like, growing up, that's I'm from central Pennsylvania. I saw lots of Steelers football. That is what I
Mhm.
remember was
Mhm.
running the football, whether it was Willie Parker, Jerome Bettis, Rashard Mendenhall, Le'Veon Bell, Najee Harris as of late, Jalen Warren right now, right? It was running the football and it was throwing to the tight end. That was Heath Miller. That was right now it's Pat Fryermuth. I forget Jesse James, right? What's his last name
Vance
was like Spaeth or
McDonald.
whatever, right? Like
Yeah.
yeah, Eric
Yes.
Ebron the season that they had him, right? It was like you utilize the tight end and you run the football.
Mhm.
And I think that the Steelers under Mike Tomlin got significant benefit of having Antonio Brown for as long as they did and him being as special as he was for as long as he was, that it kind of they got away from it because they're like, "Oh, we've got receivers. We can really utilize receivers." And it's like you can, but you can't forget everything else too, right? You can't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Right.
And I feel like that combined with, Rodgers being in love with his guys is why we saw such a horrendous offensive performance this
Mhm.
last week.
Mhm. I agree with you. I also think though that like the Steelers played poorly. The Steelers coaches didn't coach a great game. The also injuries though with this team have been a massive factor with regard to specific key injury groups and players. TJ Watt is a critical part of this team, even though he's not the demigod of a player that he was in his prime, single handedly wrecking games. He's still a top 10 edge rusher,
Sure.
top five, top 10 ish edge rusher right now. And he's been out, and hopefully he'll play in this last game. But the Steelers generate pressure via their outside linebackers being able to get to the quarterback on one on ones. And him being out hampers that. The Steelers' offensive line has faced massive injuries. Isaac Sumalo, Broderick Jones on the left side, both of those dudes being out. They've had injuries on the offensive line that's made it harder to establish that running game you're talking about. DK Metcalf, Calvin Austin, Darnell Washington, all three of those dudes I would consider to be three of their top four receiving threats besides their running backs. And the fourth will be Pat Freiermuth, who didn't get a catch until the fourth quarter. It's really hard when your best receiver is a tight end who is outside of the top 10 tight ends in the league, maybe like middle of the pack, top 15 ish. But if that dude is your best total receiver, Kenny Gainwell being a backup ish running back, those two dudes being your best receiving threats on your team, it's just so hard to live that way. The defense settled in and still played a really good game, forced turnovers out of Shador. They should have had a pick six, to be honest, too. Nick Herbig dropping into coverage, dropped one right into his chest that should have been a pick six. If that happens, that game also turns on its head as well. But man, it's just like looking at this Browns team, I'm like, Jerry Jeudy would be the best receiver on this Steelers team without DK Metcalf in. Harold Fannin would be the best receiver on this Steelers team right now with DK Metcalf out. Like it's just really hard. And I'm not saying that the Browns offense is better than the Steelers. I think that this iteration of the Steelers offense is that bad. And man, it was just really hard to live this week in that sort of way. I think if you give them 10 or 15 more minutes of game time to be figuring out, like, hey, we need to throw it to the tight end and kind of settle in. I think that the Browns started off hot, then settled into they have no offense either, and their defense might be better than the Steelers, but the Steelers figured them out. And it kind of went the opposite way from that with the Steelers, where they were bad for the better part of the game and then they settled in late. I just think that it's one of those classic situations of if you play this game 10 or 11 or 12 times, like the Steelers do win a large number of them, but this iteration of it where the Steelers offense wasn't able to figure it out soon enough or find the gas pedal, if there even is a gas pedal for this team, that was a big problem.
Yeah. I think the one other thing that I would say is like in all levels of football, you pay your coaches to be able to figure out what the right thing is to do when things get hard, right? So like I I put a lot of the I don't know if blame is exactly the right word, but like there's reason to be frustrated with Arthur Smith in this game when it's like, okay, Arthur, you're right. You don't have DK Metcalf. But you know what? You were an NFL head coach because of your ability to your offensive prowess. You're the offensive coordinator of the most storied franchise in the NFL because of your ability to do this. Like, make it work, like I think back to when the Lions hosted the Buffalo Bills last year, right? And they lost that game 48-42. And the Bills, right, obviously that was the first year without Stephon Diggs. Keon Coleman was like not really what they were looking for, and it was like, what are we going to do? Well, Ty Johnson had 5 receptions for 120 yards in that game because the coaching staff schemed it that way because they knew he could catch the ball. So like, scheme stuff up, like come up with other things, if you're the Steelers offensive coaches, like, okay, you know that you don't have DK Metcalf. It's not like DK Metcalf got hurt and and Calvin Johnson got hurt and Darnell Washington all got hurt in the same series, and all of a sudden you're like, oh shoot, you're scrambling. You knew you were without those guys all week. Figure something out. Come up with something instead of just, well, let's just do the same thing and we'll replace DK Metcalf with Marquez Valdez-Scantling and Calvin Austin with 36-year-old Adam Thielen and expect everything to work out fine, right? Like that. The coaches are problem solvers. That's why they're there. If there was no need for there to be problem solvers, then teams could be player coached, right? But it's the coaches who have a deeper mind, a deeper understanding, can see things at the macro level, and can make adjustments that are necessary for teams to be successful. And so, like, and I say that as, a Lions fan who's dealt with a lot of injury issues, especially on defense over the last 2 years, but have also felt like, okay, like, you've got other dudes, make it work, right? No, you can't keep running man every single time because your top two DBs and your two safeties that are there to help are out. Like, change something, right? Like, that's part of the responsibility of the coaching staff.
I agree with you. Just through my eyes, I think Arthur Smith right now is an average offensive coordinator, which I think's fine. This is coming off of Matt Canada, who was the worst offensive coordinator in the league. Shouldn't be an offensive coordinator in college for a D1 school. Like, he was that bad. He was terrible.
Yeah.
And I think that Arthur Smith is like middle of the pack, like between 15 and 20 maybe in the NFL. But the thing is, I think that this Steelers offense, like, I think their offensive talent might be like bottom 3 or 4 right now with this iteration. I think it's that bad as far as offensive talent. Like, the Patriots pass catchers are bad when Stephon Diggs is at this age, after coming off the injuries he's come off of, he's your best receiver. And they're by far better than the Steelers. And it's not just Drake May being far better than Aaron Rodgers. Like, those receivers are much better than these Steelers receivers. And I don't even respect those receivers that much. Like, I think they're fine, but like, I don't respect the Patriots receivers that much. I don't respect the Browns receivers that much. There are a bunch of teams in this league who I think the Jets have worse receivers right now than the Steelers, probably, with Garrett Wilson out as well.
The
But
Raiders.
man, it's the Raiders with Bowers out and after trading away
Jacoby Myers.
Jacoby Myers. Like, I think that's there, but like, I think the Steelers are solidly right now bottom 3 to 5 in receivers at minimum. Like, this talent pool right now for this offense is bad. If I look at the Steelers roster, I'm like, you need to draft a receiver in the top 3 rounds, and you need to sign a receiver in free agency or trade for one or something to be at least your wide receiver 2. Like, DK Metcalf can be your wide receiver 1, but that's why I wanted Jacoby Myers. And I think Jacoby Myers would, and the Steelers made a run at Jacoby Myers, apparently the reports were. But like, man, if the Steelers had Jacoby Myers right now with DK out, I think the Steelers offense would still be able to be afloat. Like, I think that they probably win this game if they have Jacoby Myers, probably, honestly. And that's saying something that Jacoby Myers could flip a game in the NFL. It's hard to flip a game if you're not a quarterback. But I think Jacoby Myers on this team, because of how devoid of receiving talent at the outside skill position they are, it's just hard to live that way. But the Steelers lost this game as a team. They deserved the loss. The flag was there to be had, and the refs didn't call it. But that's where I'm at. What team depressed you this week, Jack?
Well, so the Steelers were one of them, which we just finished talking about, and the other one was the Rams, which we already touched on a little bit in talking about the Falcons. And so I'm cool with just moving on. We spent a lot longer time than we would have normally just talking about one of our teams that depressed, and it's because it depressed both of us. So as a guy who lives in a household and in a family that is full of Steelers fans, it was and you being my buddy and being a Steelers fan, it was tough to watch. So that's where I was as well. So let's instead move on to our look ahead to the next week and what games are seeming important and are exciting to us. I think for starters, we should talk about both of the Saturday games this week, both of them incredibly consequential in the NFC playoff picture. The first game at 4:30 in the afternoon is Panthers Bucks. So this is the weird thing about Panthers Bucks. For those of you that don't know, Panthers right now sit at 8-8. The Bucks sit at 7-9. The Falcons sit at 7-9. And the Saints sit at whatever they're at, 5-10, I think, or 5-11, probably, maybe 6-10, 6-10. They sit at 6-10. So here's the weird thing: we came into the last 3 weeks thinking that the NFC South is going to come down to Panthers Buccaneers Week 18, and because the Buccaneers lost to the Dolphins last week, even if Tampa Bay wins this week. But I believe it's if the Saints win, the Saints beat the Falcons, then the Carolina Panthers, despite losing to Tampa Bay this week, will still win the NFC South. So really, Carolina can still win the division no matter what happens to them tomorrow. We're recording this on Friday of this week. No matter what happens to Carolina tomorrow, Carolina can still win the division. Tampa Bay, if they lose, they obviously lose the division. So the easiest path, of course, for the Panthers is to beat Tampa Bay, though they still have the out of a loss with a Saints win. Tampa Bay, if they win, they also need a Falcons win to secure the division. Wild stuff. Nick, what are your thoughts going into this game? It's in Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay is favored by a field goal, but as we've made known many times throughout this season, when a team at home is favored by a field goal, that field goal is just because of the home field advantage. It's really a toss-up. So, Nick, what are your thoughts? What are you seeing going into this week?
The Buccaneers are just playing such worse consistent football right now than the Panthers. Right now, if you look at the Panthers' total schedule that they've played right now, this last month and a half was supposed to be the easy stretch of the schedule. And that team has been falling apart, losing games that they should win. This Panthers team throughout this entire year has been the exact opposite of consistent. With the Bucks, it was consistently winning early games that were close, really tight games, Baker Mayfield being clutch, and then losing a bunch of games here down the stretch. With the Panthers, it's win, loss, win, loss, win, loss. Oh, why did they lose that game as a favorite on the road? Like, what's going on? And then winning a massive game against the team. Like, I believe they beat the Rams, or at least they made
beat the
closer.
Rams. They lost to the Saints twice, and they beat the Rams.
They beat the Packers. It's just been flipped. Yeah, they did lose to the Saints twice, which is ridiculous. But they beat the Packers. They beat the Cowboys. The Panthers' consistency is that they win at home and they're really good at home. This game is in Tampa Bay, but Tampa Bay has shown to be really bad lately. But the thing is that I'm worried about if I'm a Tampa Bay fan, even though we have home field, even though this Panthers team looked terrible this last week. I'd be really worried that Baker Mayfield's propensity to throw interceptions shows up against this Panthers team that's been really timely and really opportunistic when the ball gets thrown up in the air. That's what happened in several of these other games when they beat the Rams, Matthew Stafford threw one that was a bad interception to lose that game. They've been very timely with their takeaways. They have a run game that they can establish that Tampa Bay has struggled to stop the run. Even though they're not at home, I think that this should be a close game. But the fact that it's outside of Tampa Bay's hands and that Tampa Bay could still lose this division, even when they get a big win here at the end of the year at home, that's just really got to put a damper on things. If they could have beat the Dolphins last week, Tampa Bay losing to the Dolphins last week, and Quinn Ewers was ridiculous. Quinn Ewers and the Dolphins is another team that we could have brought up that was impressive. They got some big turnovers against Baker Mayfield, but Quinn Ewers had a pretty darn impressive game considering the type of player he was coming out of college. That was an impressive win by the Dolphins. But how, if you're Tampa Bay, with this close stretch here, down here against the Panthers, lose that sort of game? Because if they would have won that game, then if you just win this game against the Panthers, you win. But now you need to win the game against the Panthers and get help. I just feel like the Buccaneers have been shooting themselves more in the foot than they have been helping themselves. And that's been a massive problem here.
Definitely. Yeah, it's so bizarre. Like, the on the one hand, you can absolutely make the argument for the Buccaneers about the injury issues that they've had this year. And that, like, you can't not mention that, right? That said, though, they've just played some really bad football. They've played really, really bad football. I'm gonna hold off on making my prediction for this because it's part of my prediction. Um, no, you know what? No, screw it. I've got a different one anyway. I think that Tampa Bay will win this Sunday and still lose the division because I think the Falcons are better than the Saints. I think the Falcons are better than the Saints. They're playing better football right now. Yes, the Saints just got a win this last week against the Titans, but how much is that really saying, right? Um, like yes, there's reason for Saints fans to be a little intrigued about some of the players on this team going into next year. I don't know that I would say Tyler Shuck is legit, but there's definitely reason to trust him another year and see what he can provide for you. Yeah, he went 22 of 27 for 333 yards and 2 touchdowns this week. You look at what some of the guys on defense are doing. Like there's reason to be intrigued if you're a Saints fan. However, I just think the Falcons are better, and so I think that Tampa Bay will win this week, but I think Carolina still wins the division because Carolina can win if the Falcons win, and Tampa Bay needs the Saints too.
I'd be curious what happens if Tampa Bay wins and the other game's a tie. Like, I'm always curious about these Week 18 weird ties. I'm sure you remember a couple of years ago when the Chargers lost to the Raiders when they could have tied them. Both teams make the playoffs. And the Steelers made the playoffs because the Raiders kicked the field goal because the
insane.
Chargers completely mismanaged the end of that game. And there's a reason why
Brandon Staley.
Brandon, not Joe. Joe Staley's the offensive lineman for the Niners. Brandon Staley, why he's out of a job because he absolutely botched that. That was terrible. But like Week 18 ties, I'm really curious how the tiebreaker shakes out because that game obviously potentially could be even more important than the Saturday game. But if it's a tie, I wonder how the tiebreakers fall after that. But anyway, I do agree with you that I will probably favor the Falcons. They're just playing better ball right now. They have Bijan Robinson, they have London and Pitts, and Kirk Cousins is playing professional, efficient football right now, even though he's not a great player, not even a very, very good player right now. But the Saints right now are still disorderly, and although Tyler Shuck has shown some things, the Saints, I don't know that you can rely on much of their equation right now to do anything consistently.
Right. And also, like, I think everyone would agree that the Falcons have a much better defense than the Tennessee Titans do. So, like, yes, the Saints scored 34 on the Titans last week. James Pierce and Trayvon Walker seem to have been good calls for the Falcons so far. So, anyway, all right. The second game on Saturday, Seahawks 49ers, the game that determines the 1 seed and the NFC North. Really, really big, or NFC West, sorry. Really, really big game, really important game. The Seahawks going into that game 13-3. The 49ers going into it 12-4. And this game is in San Francisco. If San Francisco wins this game, then they could win the Super Bowl without ever needing to leave San Francisco, or Santa Clara. But you know what I mean, because the Super Bowl is they're hosting the Super Bowl this year. So really, really massively important game for obviously for both teams, but especially the 49ers. I think we need to give the 49ers some love. Um, Despite having Mac Jones as your quarterback for a lot of the season, despite not having Brandon Ayuk all year, despite what we said about this team, I know what I said about this team was I was really, really concerned about them because of the mass exodus of defensive players that they lost in free agency this last year. This team has still looked phenomenal. They're 12-4, and they're playing for the number one overall seed tomorrow night at 8 p.m. At home. So just I wanted to give the 49ers some love there. But Nick, what are you sort of seeing, looking for and expecting of this game tomorrow night?
What I'm looking at is, can the Seattle defense do to the 49ers what few other teams can do? And can the 49ers defense stop Seattle's offense? It's just a matter of, these two teams are quite different in terms of, Seattle's defense is incredibly good, at top five defense in the league. And I think the 49ers defense is really poor, although they are very well coordinated by Robert Saleh. He's done a tremendous job considering the talent. I just think that this 49ers defense right now has kind of fattened up against some weaker competition. This Bears team this last week scored 38. The Colts and old man Philip Rivers scored 27. The Titans, being the worst, potentially worst team in the league, even though they don't have the worst record, scored 24. The Browns scored 8. The Panthers scored 9. Cardinals scored 22. Like, I just feel like these last month and a half, 2 months, it's been a bunch of bad offenses they've played. And then the Bears just obliterated that defense, even though the Bears lost that game. I just
Mm-hmm.
don't know that the 49ers defense can actually get stops and stop the score from going into a shootout. But the thing is, I think this 49ers offense can kind of play in the mold of a game with a shootout. But what happens if it's not a shootout? If Seattle can kind of hold this to be a 20-17 type of game, a 17-14 type of game, I would favor Seattle in that spot. I think if it were a shootout, I potentially would favor the Niners, just in their ability to be multifaceted with Christian McCaffrey and Kittle. And they have a variety of receivers, even though they don't have the highest end. They do have a number of guys that they trust. And so I'd be
For
really
sure.
curious what kind of game this shakes out to be, as far as if it's a higher or lower scoring affair. Right now, I think I'd favor Seattle. I just think they're the more talented team. I think they're a very well coached team. I think the Niners are very well coached as well. But I think that there's not a massive coaching edge, and the talent edge is close. Sorry, the coaching edge is close. The talent deficit's pretty big, I would say, in Seattle's favor. And so I
Mm-hmm.
would favor Seattle, even though the 49ers play at home. I'd go Seattle here.
Yeah, I'm also taking Seattle. I made the prediction a couple weeks ago, or a few weeks ago, almost a month ago, that Seattle will win the NFC West. And I'm still holding to that. So I think Seattle will win. But San Francisco might end up in the NFC Championship game. Like they really might.
Mm,
Because if Seattle wins, the loser of this game is playing the winner of the NFC South in the wild card matchup.
mhm,
And then presumably, though it depends, the NFC has some really, really strong wild card teams this year.
mhm,
Presumably, then the winner of this game would be playing or the loser of this game would presumably then be playing the winner of this game the following week. Um, so I think that makes things really interesting because the 49ers have already beaten Seattle. And so if the 49ers were to win this week, I would almost guarantee Seattle to the NFC Championship because it's so,
mhm,
so hard to beat a team three times in a single
mhm.
season. Um, but we'll have to wait and see how all of that plays out. And also, the Rams are likely traveling to Philly in the wild card round. Though that kind of depends on what happens in Lions Bears on Sunday afternoon. Um, and I right now I think I like the Rams over the Eagles in a winner take all game like that. So all right. Last game that I think we should talk about, though we did talk about it a little bit already, but just to sort of put the cherry on top, is Ravens Steelers. Again, it's the Sunday night game. There are a lot of really good games this week. Like, I'm really excited about Chargers Broncos. I think that could be a really good game, but the Broncos have already locked up the division. Um, so really, that's one for them to hold on to the one seed in the AFC. But the only other game that has consequences on teams making the playoffs and division winners is Steelers Ravens on Sunday night. The game is in Pittsburgh. However, right now the odds makers favor Baltimore by 3.5 points, which I think is very interesting. Basically, what that says to me is that if this game was in Baltimore, they'd be favoring Baltimore by a whole touchdown, which is, again, very, very interesting. So, Nick, I know we already talked about both these teams, but what are you sort of expecting this Sunday night?
I actually, as a Steelers fan, I love that the Steelers are underdogs here. Mike Tomlin, as an underdog, has an unbelievable record against the spread and straight up. Mike Tomlin as an underdog at home, I think that's a really good spot to be in. I just think that Mike Tomlin right now, I what I love about this game is that this is an over my dead body type of game for both of these coaches. That both of these coaches, whichever one loses, could be fired. And so this is kind of the loser has to leave town like shootout at the OK Corral type of duel. And so we could see all the stops be pulled out here. I actually like as well that Lamar Jackson's playing. I think that the conservative type of offense that they play with Tyler Huntley actually would favor the Ravens more. I think if the Ravens could duplicate that game plan they had against the Packers last week, where just running the ball dominantly and playing efficient offense off of that with Tyler Huntley, that they could beat the Steelers. But I think this is a game we see turnovers by both sides. I don't know if it's multiple turnovers by both sides, but I would bet on turnovers in this game. I think that it's a classic Steelers-Ravens low to mid scoring affair. I think, as I was saying, like a 17-18, a 20-21. Like, I think this could be a very close margin. I think that the Steelers not having DK Metcalf, it showed up to be terrible last week. I think the Steelers offense is going to come out looking better this week than they did last week, even though there's no reason necessarily for it. I think that being at home really favors this Steelers team that is far more comfortable at home in these spots. And I think that it not being a short week favors the Steelers as well. The Steelers really struggle on short weeks. And although the Ravens have an extra day of rest because they played last week on Saturday and the Steelers on Sunday, I think that the Steelers actually have a really good shot in this game, even though they are underdogs at home. I like every fiber of my being is negative in terms of like, oh man, the Steelers team isn't good. It's Lamar Jackson. The Ravens are really good. But I feel like this is a spot where the Steelers actually are going to be able to thrive when they are an underdog and people are picking against them. And depending on always pre-show, when you see pre-game, the Steelers, Ravens, and everybody picking against the Steelers do better. But if it's Steelers, the Steelers being a favorite by everybody picking pregame, the Steelers definitely underachieve in those spots a lot more. So I would really be curious how the pundits are feeling day of the game. Are they favoring this Ravens team that has Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, or are they favoring the at-home Pittsburgh Steelers, who have been the better team for the better part of this year? I'm curious about that. But I'd favor the Steelers, but I think this is the weird nuance. I think the Ravens are the better team, but the Steelers could still win despite that, which is the story of the Ravens and Steelers the last 5 years. That I think that the Steelers have lost, or I think the Steelers have won a lot of games against the Ravens when the Ravens have been better for years and years since Big Ben was in his prime. But I think the Steelers just know how to win these games because Mike Tomlin's Mike Tomlin.
Yeah, I'm taking the Steelers to win 23-20. I think that the Steelers will perform much better this next week compared to last week. One, they are at home. Two, the Browns defense is so much better than the Ravens defense. Like, it's honestly so sad that the Browns' record is so bad considering how insane of a defense they really have. Sure, this year it hasn't been as dominant as it has been in the years past, but still, it's a really good defense. Myles Garrett is the defensive player of the year. You could make the argument for Carson Schlesinger to be a finalist for defensive rookie of the year. I think he's leading the NFL or is up there in total tackles this year. We talked about Denzel Ward already. They've got other guys as well. Mason Graham, their rookie on the D line. So like the Browns have a really good defense and they have a better defense than the Ravens. So I think that alone will lend itself to Pittsburgh having a better day offensively than they did last week. Um, yeah, my prediction last week was that we won't see both Harbaugh and Jackson back for the Ravens next season, and it would not surprise me if the Ravens lose this game and that Harbaugh and the Ravens agree to part ways. So, um, yeah, so I've got the Steelers winning this game 23-20 and winning the AFC North, and in doing so, getting the incredible opportunity to host the insanely good Houston Texans in a playoff game the next week, which I hate to break to you, I would have to favor Houston in that game. So, but anyway, all right. Let's get to predictions. We do have some more color on our sheets than we did over the last couple weeks. Nick, your Detroit or your New York Giants will lose out prediction did not play out. Your Detroit Lions winning the NFC North, unfortunately for me, did not play out. You got two.
My NFC
Uh,
South one is also wrong because
well,
the
you've
Bucks
got
lost to the
so
Dolphins.
I did both colors because two of your elements are correct. You predicted the Panthers would beat the Bucks week 16. That happened. You predicted the Panthers would lose to Seattle week 17. That happened. But you also predicted the Bucks would beat the Dolphins week 17. So the final element to it is Bucks beat the Panthers in week 18. We'll see if that happens. On my end, Arizona obviously has not won 3+ games since I made that prediction. I did get right that Kansas City will not make the playoffs, and I've got a few others that are wait and see. So we will see what happens with those. Nick, what is your prediction for this week? It is the 2nd of January, 2026. It is 3:45 p.m. And your prediction is what?
My prediction is that this year's Super Bowl MVP will not be a quarterback. Simple, like
Ooh.
we'll know it when it happens. Like I think that right there.
This year's Super Bowl MVP will not be a quarterback.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I'm intrigued. I like it. I
I
like it.
just think it
So,
goes along the lines with the quarterbacks being weaker going into this playoffs. Like we're talking about Drake May, I think if they make the Super Bowl could easily do it. I think Josh Allen could. I think Lamar Jackson if he did. I think Brock Purdy depending on the way the game goes. But weaker quarterback field, I think that a lot of these teams have great players who aren't quarterbacks. Like I think if Sam Darnold and JSN had a great Super Bowl, JSN could win the Super Bowl MVP. I just think there's a really good shot here with a bunch of other great offensive and defensive players out there in the field that we get to see one of those dudes get that Super Bowl MVP award.
all right, I like it. I think there's certainly some credence to be had with that. My prediction this week, um, I'm going all in with this. I think that the Seattle Seahawks will win the Super Bowl. That is my prediction. Um, I really like him a lot. I can't stop thinking about him when I think about who I like out of the NFC. It helps that a lot of other NFC playoff teams have not been impressive. In the last couple weeks, like I'm really concerned about the Rams especially after their loss to the Falcons. Really concerned about Green Bay. They're on a 3-game losing streak. Um, Philadelphia, I just really don't trust right now. Chicago is just really young and inexperienced, and I like Seattle's chances, head to head against them if they face them. The winner of the NFC South, I don't think, is winning a playoff game, which would then leave for Seattle, San Francisco as the one team in their way. Again, I think if Seattle beats San Francisco this week, obviously they have the 1 seed. And so I like them at home against San Francisco, especially now. Also, if Seattle loses to San Francisco, which could happen, then like I mentioned, you never see a team beat another team 3 times in the same season. And San Francisco would have already beaten Seattle twice. So I'm really bullish on Seattle. I think they're going to come out of the NFC. And the only team coming out of the AFC that I would be concerned about because of having experience would be Buffalo. Um, but right now, they're going to have the hardest path coming out of the AFC. As it stands right now, they're the 7 seed. So now, granted, there's still some stuff that could happen. The Chargers might lose to the Broncos this week, and the Buffalo will probably beat the Jets, right? So that would move them up to the 6. So like, okay, that changes things a little bit, but still, I am bullish on the Seattle team, and I'm bullish on them compared to what the rest of the playoff picture looks like right now.
I like that. I think this season we're seeing it in college football with a bunch of juggernaut teams of the last decade losing in Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State. This year, I'm looking at it and I'm like, who's great? I don't know what teams are great. I think that Seattle has shown flashes of great. I think the Rams have shown flashes of great, but the Rams just lost a really big, important game in prime time with extra rest to a Falcons team playing for nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Seattle, we've seen Sam Darnold throw terrible picks in big spots for the last several years. Like I just don't know who you trust on either side of the bracket. It's such an interesting year because of that. I think that you
Mm-hmm.
could say you have a free roll to bet whoever you want to win the Super Bowl. I just don't feel like it will be a good year for that because I don't feel like people have a good feel for it this year because it's so wide open everywhere.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It'll be really, really interesting. All right. Well, hey, everybody, that was our last regular season episode for the NFL of the Skyline Sports Podcast for the 2025 NFL season. When we talk to you next week, assuming that I don't have a baby yet, we will be previewing the playoffs. Looking back and talking about the results of these 3 games that we just talked about. And Nick, I think next week we should do a whole playoff bracket. We each fill out our own
Mhm.
playoff bracket.
Sure, for
I
sure.
think that'll be a ton of fun. So that's what you can look forward to next week. Be on the lookout. We are about to go record a college episode as well, so be on the lookout for that. Our reactions to the second round of the college football playoff, and seeing how we feel about some of these teams, some of the very surprising events that took place over the last 2 days for the second round. But until then, we will talk to you later. Have a great day, and thanks for the support. Have a good one.